I spent 2 years sending surveys to thousands of artists and I got 24,789 responses back. And what I found is that there are 3 mistakes that are super easy to prevent that almost all artists make. The first one is the Michelangelo Effect. It's the 16th century and Michelangelo is working on David in his studio, one of the best sculptures ever made, and he has a big problem. Here's the thing, his patron Piero Soderini walks in the studio. Now Piero considers himself somewhat of an art connoisseur, and so he walks in the studio, he looks at David and he says to Michelangelo, the nose is too big, you have to change it. Now this annoys Michelangelo deeply because the nose is absolutely fine, there's nothing wrong with the nose, and if he would change the nose, then he would destroy the artwork. Now, Michelangelo also understands that if he disagrees with the fragile egos of the patrons, that he will lose his career, because those are different times. You cannot simply disagree with the overlords at that time. You are working for them, and not the other way around. If they say that you're going to do something, you have to do it. And this is a turning point in history. So here's what he did. He grabs his hammer and his chisel, and also grabs some marble dust from the ground, and then he goes up on the scaffolding and asks Soderini to follow him, and he starts working on the nose, and he makes loud noises with his hammer and chisel, and every time the hammer hits the chisel, he lets some marble dust fall from his hand. He is not actually working on the nose, he's pretending to work on the nose. Now at this moment his heart is pounding in his chest, because if Soderini figures out that he is fooling him, that he is pretending, then he most certainly loses his career. And so he's working, pretending, and after it's finished, he asks Soderini, what do you think? And Soderini replies, it's absolutely gorgeous, you made the statue come to life. Michelangelo understood that by arguing with someone, he doesn't achieve anything, he only makes the other person feel inferior. And that can only lead towards micro-revenge afterwards. Now, why is this story so important? Why is this one of the most powerful stories you can hear as an artist? Well, in my surveys, I asked artists the following thing. What would you do when a patron asks to make a change? 13% of artists said, politely refuse with clear communication, artwork comes first. Now, what happens with those artists who will say that? Most of them will not get any funding afterwards. Most of them will lose clients, will lose their audience, and will subsequently just make less money over time. Only 6% of artists said that they would do what Michelangelo would do, and luckily only 14% of artists said, adjust the art so that it fits the patron's request, because the client comes first. The client comes first. This is something that we hear all of the time. Customer comes first, client comes first. But what happens with those artists who actually execute on that? Well, in that case, we get the Hollywood phenomenon. There hasn't been a single movie in the last 15 years that reached the top 20 movies of all time, even though Hollywood has better cameras, better equipment, more money, more everything. And so what is happening here? Why is that? Why are they making a remake of Snow White and then erasing the prince from the storyline because it's not woke enough? These writers know that that's an important part of the story. They know that that is a juxtaposition with the evil queen, that it is a heroic character, that it is some kind of plot twist in the story, and they're just erasing. They know that they're not doing what Michelangelo did. They know that they are just dancing to the strings of the overlords who don't know anything about storytelling, who don't know anything about making art. And so why are these writers sacrificing that? Here's the thing. They are supposed to be the best writers in the world. Sure, they can manipulate language to then fool the patron overlords by adding some woke stuff subtly without actually destroying the storyline and then still making a great movie. Sure, they must be able to do that. And so why are they not doing that? Well, the simple answer is that they just suck. They're just not the best writers in the world. The Michelangelos of today's society, the Michelangelos of the 21st century, they are not working for Hollywood anymore. Now that's enough for our little rant. A more important question that we should ask ourselves is, how can we use this Michelangelo strategy so that we can manipulate perception and make everyone happy? And with manipulate, I don't mean the bad side of manipulation. I don't mean manipulating so that you can benefit from it. That just makes you a bad human being. What I mean is manipulation in function of other people, in function of the audience, in function of the collector, in function of people that you are serving. Well, let's take a look at how the best galleries in the world are doing exactly that. If you go to New York City and you go to one of the galleries we subconsciously know that the galleries are paying a lot of money to stand there. In New York City Center, you are paying 20k, 25k, 30k a month in rent to have a shop there. And so you walk inside of that shop, you obviously expect that the gallery owner or the shop owner is using the real estate wisely because they're paying so much. And what do you see? You see an empty wall with one painting hanging inside. You see an empty gallery with just one painting hanging inside. And so this is the exact opposite of what you expect, and that is why it feels so luxurious. Subconsciously we know that to hang that painting there for 1 month, it already takes $30,000. And you see this trick being used all over the place. If you go to an electronics shop where they sell phones and you go to all the phones, you will see a table with 100 phones, all of the phones displayed. And then you go to the Apple section, and what do you see? You see the same table with just one phone displayed. Apple is using that trick. Subconsciously we know that it's expensive to be there in that shop, and Apple is showing that. Just one phone. That's it. That's how you create that vibe of luxuriousness, because you don't want them to think that the phone is the exact same phone as all the other phones, which it is, by the way. It is the exact same phone. And so what do? Well, you create that empty space, and that is not just what Apple wants, it's what the customer wants. The customer wants Apple to market their products in a way that those products feel more luxurious than all the other products, so that they can walk around with their Apple, with their Basquiat, with their Rothko, with whatever they want to walk around with. Yeah, they're obviously not going to walk around with the Mark Rothko, but hanging in their home. And those customers want that product to showcase luxuriousness, to showcase uniqueness. And you can do that with something as simple as empty space. Now, besides this empty space trick, there are obviously a dozen other tricks, and I've made a free 20-page PDF guide for art fairs for beginner artists, and in that guide I share some of those tricks. There's one trick, for example, where you can use lights to manipulate things in a particular way, just like you can use empty space. I will share the PDF for free at the end of the video. The second mistake that artists make is one of the biggest mistakes that you can make. 79% of artists have no dedicated website where they sell their art. And without having a place to sell your art online, almost everything I've said in any video that I've ever made becomes obsolete. And that is where the sponsor of this video comes in. Pixpa is an easy to use all-in-one website builder specifically designed for artists to showcase and sell their work online. No coding required. Their easy templates allow artists of any age to build a custom website. Start selling your art with Pixpa today. Link in the description with a discount for our community. The third mistake has something to do with 15th century prostitution, and from this point on, let's refer to them as adult service workers. Let me explain. So, in the 15th century, these adult service workers had an amazing business model because every single guy wanted what they had to offer. But they also believed in the Christian values. They believed in God. They believed that this thing, adult service work, was a sinful thing that would put them in hell. And so they wanted to figure out a way to go to heaven, but also to make money along the way. Now, Christianity saw this demand in the marketplace, and so what did they do? Well, they created indulgences that people could buy to purify themselves from their sins, to release themselves from their sins. And so here's what would happen. These adult service workers would work, then make money, then feel guilty and sinful. And so they would buy indulgences to release themselves from their sin, and then they would have no money anymore because they just spend it on indulgences, and so they have to work again as adult workers, and you get the point. The circle is round. Perhaps this sounds familiar. It's actually very similar to modern day consumerism, where people are working a job they hate to buy stuff they don't need, to impress people they don't even like. Now, what does all of this have to do with artists? What does all of this have to do with selling your art online? Well, let's think about this. Why did these adult service workers buy indulgences? Well, they simply believed that what they were doing was a sin. But in the 21st century, a lot of people would argue that it is actually not sinful at all. I'm not going to make that argument. Some people believe it's sinful, other people don't believe it's sinful. But it's easy for us to see that if those 15th century adult service workers would believe believe it is not sinful. We believe some of those 21st century ideals, they would not need to buy indulgences. They would not need to spend their profits on an invented thing that the church made up. And with those extra profits, they might even be able to upgrade their life and stop adult service work altogether, because they might not even want to do that. It might be out of necessity that they need to do that. And so what does this have to do with selling art? Well, through my research, I figured out that a lot of people, a lot of artists believe that selling their art or commercializing their art in some way is sinful. They just don't call it sinful, they call it selling out. And so we have the same vicious cycle. I remember deeply being afraid of selling out my work. I believed that being seen as a sellout artist would be the death sentence of my career, and that the moment somebody would think that, it would be over for me. And so this vicious cycle resulted in the following thing. I hated my life and I hated my job, and I dreamed of becoming a full-time artist. But because I believed in the sellout myth, I would not be making money, and then I would go on YouTube figuring out how to make money from my art. I would be watching hours and hours and hours, but because I believed in this sellout myth, I would never actually execute on any of the ideas. And so because I wasn't executing, I wasn't making any money. Because I wasn't making any money, I would go back to that job, hating it even more and dreaming of becoming a full-time artist even more. And the vicious cycle is round. Now, how many artists are suffering from this myth? Well, let's take a look. I asked artists, what do you consider most as selling out? And only 29% of artists said that selling out is a myth and doesn't actually exist. 71% of artists are falling for this trap. And so how do you stop this vicious cycle? Well, it's as simple as just stop believing in the sellout artist myth. The sellout artist myth is not real. It's just like Andy Warhol said. Making money is art, and working is art, and good business is the best art. The reality is that selling art is not real. There never has been an artist that at the end of their life thought by themselves, wow, I wish I sold less art. I wish I sold less art so that people wouldn't have believed that I was a sellout artist. That never happened. No artist ever in history of humanity thought that at the end of their life. And so you have to stop believing in this myth. Now, stop believing in the myth is very easy. The hard part is realizing that those myths exist, that those belief systems that are holding you back exist. And in my research, I figured out that there are over 40 belief systems that artists are believing in today that are holding them back massively. I've made a list of over 40 myths that you can check out to see which one you believe in, which one is holding you back. On top of that, there's the free PDF art fair guide where I share pro tips, manipulation tricks, just like Michelangelo in the beginning of this video. Now, besides this, there's one myth I didn't feature in this list. One mindset trick that all top level artists have in common. All of them believe. I featured it in a video called Drowning in Unsold Pieces, Selling Secrets Galleries Won't Tell You. Link in the description and in the end screen. That said, get the hell out of here.